All right, welcome everyone to the Backyard Farming Series. This is the Small Flock Series. My name is Megan Purdue. I'm the Ag Agent in Worcester County, Maryland. Today we will be hearing from our University of Maryland Extension Poultry Specialist, Dr. John Moyle.
Good day, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great day out there. Today, we just want to talk a little bit about Chicken 911. This is something we put together a few years back during COVID when people were asking a lot of questions about, well, a lot of people got chickens, so we talked a little bit about health questions at that time as well. So one of the things we want to talk about first off before we get going is because we're University of Maryland, we have to do some required slides such as this one here saying we don't discriminate. The next one's more fun because it actually plays a video.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider.
Oh, it didn't play all the way this time. It's supposed to play a bunch of different languages. Anyway, we are an equal opportunity provider, so if there's any problems, let us know. And finally, oh, there it goes. The most important one probably at this day is this advice and this presentation does not represent medical, veterinarian advice, or legal advice. Always seek a competent veterinarian whenever possible to provide advice for your poultry. The use of websites, products, or brands is not an endorsement. We may say things or I may talk about different things. It's not an endorsement. It just happens to be what we're used to using at that time. So one of the first things we want to talk about is actually that first line. There it is. There it is. All right. So one of the first things you want to do anytime you have animals is have a veterinarian. You need to establish a relationship with a veterinarian early on. Well, it's very hard to find veterinarians nowadays that have a good understanding of poultry. I don't think it's a very large topic in veterinary schools anymore. I think it's just kind of something they breeze through. But again, you want to have a veterinarian as a not as a friend. Well, as a friend's good too, but how am I trying to say? You want to have a relationship, in other words, so that they have seen your animals, they know what you're doing, so in an emergency, they're able to help you. We can no longer just get antibiotics like we used to. You have to have a prescription from a veterinarian. So these are very important relationships to build up so that when you do have issues, you can address them. Other things you want to look at are state diagnostic laboratories. They're great. State diagnostic laboratories provide necropsies. Well, they'll go through if you have problems with your birds that are dying, they can do a necropsy and go, which is, after death. So again, when you take birds there, it's a one-way trip. Your birds are not coming back, but your birds will be diagnosed. They will do an autopsy, a necropsy as we call it, and they were going to go through and look and see what the problems are, so that then you can address them going forward. And this is a very important service for our small flock people, and it is usually done at a reduced rate, a minimal cost for small flock growers. In fact, I know several states the commercial side actually supplements the cost for the small flock side because we want to know what's out there. If your birds are sick and dying, we need to get ahead of things and find that disease before it can cross over and cause problems in our industry. As you all know, right now there's a lot of avian influenza out there. So if you're seeing sudden death in your birds and high mortality, please contact your local Department of Ag, and they will let you know what to do and how they want to test those birds. But again, also, because we are dealing with animals, any part of life comes with death. And sometimes when we have birds that are suffering, they've been injured or they're sick or something else is wrong, one of the best things we can do is euthanasia. All birds, when we do this, must be euthanized in a manner that is humane. This is something it's kind of hard to talk about sometimes. People don't want to deal with it, but it's also one of those things that we have to deal with because part of life is death. So the most important way to do that is called cervical dislocation. It's the most common method used on farms. Other methods that we can use are rapid decapitation, which is basically chopping off the head. I always call it the grandma method. I'm not sure if that's appropriate anymore. But anyway, that's one of the best ways to do it if you're not sure how to do dislocation because it's a quick, painless death. Another way we can do it is displace oxygen with nitrogen or carbon dioxide. Put them in a bag, fill it up with carbon dioxide. That's one way to do it. But again, that's really not very practical on small farms. So we encourage people to learn how to properly do cervical dislocation. If you've ever seen how it's done, I mean, these pictures are kind of in sequence of what you're going to do. You're going to put your hand right at the base of the head, the inside between your thumb and your finger. You're going to put it right at the base of the head. close down, and then you stretch and snap at the same time your wrist. You twist your wrist really quickly, and in doing so, you can dislocate that vertebrae right there at the axis, at atlas. By doing that, it's a quick, painless death for the bird. If you're not sure how to do it, ask somebody that knows how and know what you're doing before you try it. Just because we want to make sure we don't injure birds. By the way, this is staged. This bird lived through it. It's still running around on a farm here in southern shore of Maryland. So again, important to know how to do that. It's an important step as owners of birds that we need to understand. Birds that need to be culled or the ones that need to be euthanized are going to be those that have serious problems. If you look at these birds, none of these birds are going to survive for long. I'm actually very surprised that the bird we found, the first picture it's actually a laying hen type bird, but look how bad that beak is twisted. That beak is at a 90-degree angle. I don't know if that's a genetic order that happened or if that was just a recent injury. I'm guessing the latter because the bird has grown so much. With that type of a beak, it wouldn't have been able to eat as a youngster. So again, it's a sad situation. There's really not a lot you can do to repair that. So euthanasia is probably the best bet. The middle picture with the 4 feet, hard to raise those. I've never been successful at being able to raise them. Basically what it is the embryo was 2 embryos that kind of developed together and you end up with some issues there. As you can see, the legs are going the opposite direction. And then the last picture on the right is a chick that's hatched, but it did not absorb the yolk. So that yolk was outside the body. That is just a huge pouch that's waiting to become infected with bacteria. So again, these are situations where we need to promptly euthanize these birds and do it quickly and humanely in order, because they're not going to make it. So these are some examples that we want to euthanize, but let's talk a little bit about what a healthy bird looks like. You know, what you want to see in a healthy bird is a bird, bright eyes, yellow legs, plumage is nice. These are pictures of good looking birds. You can see they're not dirty. They're clean, and that's an important thing you'll notice on birds. When they're healthy, they tend to be clean. Yes, you can get some muddy days where they might get a little bit dirty that way, but they tend to be clean and stay clean. Versus sick birds, they're going to be huddled up. They're going to be dirtier. They're not going to be moving around. Look at the eyes in these pictures. You can see that there's some real issues there with their eyes. They're closed. They're not bright. The combs, look at the color of the combs. They're very pale. These are showing signs of sickness or injury because we often just to say, oh, look, they're hurt or they're sick, but sometimes they'll look this way because of injuries. Other things we can look for would include, there it is, weakness, muscle tremors, droopy wings, all of these things, lameness. We want to look for this because why did that happen? What can we do to prevent it? Sometimes the way we have our farms laid out, the way that we have our weak waters and drinkers out, we can actually put them in a way that can cause injury. So we want to make sure that our farms are safe for our birds. Other things we want to look for to make sure our flock are healthy is we want to look at their poop. This is what normal poop looks like. Yeah, there's a little bit of red in there, but that's nothing wrong. Those are good looking poops. You can see we've got the white cap on the ends to show that the nitrogen, that's because chickens don't pee. Versus if we have bad looking, we're going to see things like this. Again, it's runny, it's different colored. So these are also signs of disease that we want to be very aware of. When we start to see things like this, we need to be concerned and try and figure out what we're going to do to prevent any spread of disease. Is it a disease? Is it the feed? Why are they performing this way, or why are we seeing these type of things? But back to our first aid. All of our farms should have first aid kits. We should have the things we need to take care of our animals. For example, we're going to need disposable gloves, disinfectant sprays. They're great. Love them. For cleaning wounds, you want to be able to disinfect things. Then we're going to want some topical antibiotics. We want to put over wounds if we've got cuts or scrapes or things like that. Some septic powder, for those that don't know, that's just a powder that's going to stop the bleeding. It's going to act as a coagulant for the blood to keep it from going. Things we want to keep too as well as vitamins and electrolytes. Mineral oil to lube things up, scissors, tweezers, nail clippers, super glue. I would almost put on there, you could put nail clippers, put on dog nail trimmers. Those work really well for a lot of the things we do with chickens. Breeding saddles, if you have males and females, we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we want some sterile saline solutions, hydrogen peroxide. This is kind of the bare minimum because these are the things you're going to need to use to work with your birds when they have issues. So let's talk about some of the issues that you could face. We'll start off with young birds. One of the first things you're going to see is we sometimes have chicks that can't hatch out properly. You see all the stuff stuck on the back of the head, the shell's stuck on there. And we saw a bit of this, so what we want to do is take that and get some warm water, because if you try and pull it off, it's stuck tight. But what you can do is get some warm water and dab on there and get a little water on there and it'll soften it up. And a lot of times after it's softened up, you can just take a pair of tweezers and pull it right off. Then if you still can't do that, take a pair of scissors. Remember, we've got tweezers and scissors in our kit. And you can take those and you can trim neatly along there, trying, make sure you don't get the skin, but trim like close up there, the down, and you're able to trim that off and remove all of that debris. So again, we have this chick in that first photo there. That's what it looks like. When we got done, this is what the chick looked like. There it is. There's what the chick looked like when we finally got him all cleaned up a little bit. You can see he still looks a little rough. Give that chick a couple days, and then you have something that looks like that. So work with these chicks, and getting that off is very important. If you leave it on, the other chicks are going to peck at them. They're dirty. They just won't do well. So you just kind of want to clean that off. But again, the secret to getting those off, patience, a little bit of warm water, and then keep those chicks warm because we don't want to chill them. And again, use your scissors and your tweezers appropriately to get things taken care of. Another thing we often see is called spraddle-legged. You can see in this first picture here how the legs are going out wide. One of the things we can do is take like some pipe cleaner or a little piece of wire or something like that. I like the pipe cleaner because it's kind of soft. And you wrap it around and you pull their legs together. And then you can see in the last picture, now it's able to stand. And it's able to waddle a little bit and move around. It's also important, now these pictures are taken on a smooth surface because we needed the pictures. But in real life, we don't want them on a smooth surface because a smooth surface allows those legs to slide, and so they're going to slide out. So once you get them all, bandaged up, I guess you'd call this, make sure you keep them on a surface that's not smooth. Shavings is a great thing to do because if we have the shavings, it's rough, it's got surfaces, their legs won't spraddle as much. And you're going to keep these on for a few days and then check to see if those ligaments and everything have pulled tight. Take it off, let them watch them, see if it works. If you have to, put it on for a couple more days, but keep an eye on them. You also don't want to put them on too tight because remember, they're growing really fast at this time, and we don't want to restrict any of that growth that's going on in those legs. Another thing we see a lot of, particularly early on in the year, especially with chicks that are shipped, is you're going to see pasty butts. As you can see, this chick has got paste or poop stuck to its butt. Pasty butts can be caused from a lot of things. Typically, and the most important reason I've really seen it most of my career is that chicks got cooled, or they were transported, they got cold during transportation, and in doing so, they end up getting this pasty butt. But pasty butt can also be caused by other things, such as a feed problem, or oddly enough, if they get too hot, they can get pasty butt. So again, you got to really watch the temperature control on that. But when it comes to it, if you catch it quick, it's really not a problem. This chick, you can already see it's already causing problems to it. Again, look at it. You're seeing those droopy wings compared to the others. It's not up there eating with the other birds. It's already feeling that the effects of this. And what has happened is it's stuck to its butt. It can't poop. So because it can't poop, it's getting backed up inside. So the first thing we want to do is get that off. The way you want to do that is you want to moisten the area again, because if you just try and rip it off, you're going to get some skin and a lot of feathers. By moistening it first, you may still get some of the down to come off with it, which is very common, but it's going to be much easier on the bird and it's going to feel a lot better for them rather than just a quick yank off. Typically, these chicks like this one here, if you get that off, it's going to recover really quick, and just keep an eye on them though to make sure that it doesn't come back a second time. But typically I've found over my life that usually you get it the first, you get it taken care of and it's gone away with as long as you can keep your brooder temperature correct. We also have chickens get abrasions. If you have a huge deep laceration or major wounds, you're probably going to need a veterinarian, or you're going to need to euthanize the bird. That's going to be your call at that point. But for minor cuts and scrapes, It's typically like we do with everything else. We want to clean that wound. We want to apply a topical antiseptic. Then we want to isolate the bird because if we leave it with the other birds, they're going to peck at it. But by isolating it, we don't want to stick it off somewhere alone. Maybe we want to isolate it where it can still see its neighbors, its friends, because chickens as a flocking bird, they get really stressed out if they're alone. So you want to make sure that they have, view of their companions. We want to treat them for shock as well. And that means you're going to have to provide a lot of fresh water, keep things fresh, food, maybe you give it some nice treats or things like that, something to keep it perked up and to keep it going. We also, because a lot of times we get abrasions and things like that, it's the result of a predator attack. Even if the birds didn't get hurt, you will oftentimes see a lot of trauma. So you may have to actually treat those birds a little bit different with a little bit of TLC to try and get them to where that they can recover through that time. And again, what do we want to do? Food, water, lower stress, keep them healthy throughout that period. Another problem I've seen a few times throughout my life and we've dealt with is a broken beak. Sometimes a chicken's going to get a crack in its beak, it's going to get a split or things like that. And the beak is actually just keratin like your nails. It's pretty much the same thing as your nails or the nails on a dog. So what we want to do is we can just glue it back together. If you get some super glue, put it back together, hold it till it's firm. I've seen birds recover quite quickly from that, a split beak or where they broke the, if they break off just the tip, it's not a big deal because we're probably going to try and trim some of those sometime anyway. But again, we can glue that back. If you have something like a cross beak where the beaks are at a 90-degree angle like that one I showed you, I typically recommend euthanizing them. There are people out there that have tried. I've never done it, I'll be honest. But you can try to get it straightened back up. But again, if you're going to try and do that, you're looking at moving muscles and tissues and bones. So you're going to need to get a veterinarian involved at that point. Other things while we're talking about keratinaceous tissues is nails. Well, beaks, stay with the beaks for a second. As you can see, here's a beak. It's very sharp, it's pointy, it's getting long. You can just take a pair of nail clippers, toenail clippers, and reach up there and just trim those ends and blunt them up. It's a really easy way to take care of them. But again, I kind of like, in this case here, we're using toenail clippers. I kind of like the dog nail clippers. I think they work very well as well. If you're having problems with chickens that are going cannibalistic, this is another way to do it by blunting them and making their beak blunt. You don't want to go too much. You don't want to get back in the quick where it bleeds, but you can blunt that end up and make it a lot less of a weapon if they peck at each other, and it can help prevent some of the cannibalism that we see. Again, long nails, same thing. You can see the nails are getting really long. They're scratching each other, particularly on breeder males that are mounting hens. We could just reach it, pull those nails up, trim them back, and that'll help prevent some of the damage that we're seeing. Other things you might run into, I know it's kind of a little bit different topic, but it's kind of the same because we can deal with these quite easily ourselves, and that is external parasites. We have several different kinds. We have, like, for example, scaly leg mites. You see that they get underneath there, they burrow up underneath these scales. The scales will pop up. They're crusty. You can also see mites up like these here. This center one is a stay fast or stick tight fleas. And they get right around the eyes, up on the wattle and all that. And all these little dots, all these little bumps are fleas. And what they're doing is the females are now bedded in, kind of like a tick, and they just hang on there and eat off the host and drop eggs. So if you see them, one of the best things you can do is get rid of them. You can pick them off with tweezers. You can use insecticides or whatever you want, or whatever's effective for you. I kind of like to pick them off and then cover up the areas with some uh, jelly or some AD ointment, something like that, just to kind of suffocate anything that's there that you're not seeing. And the last picture is a picture of northern fowl mites. To find these, you're going to look on the vent and you're going to look around the back of the bird. And you're going to look. It's going to look like little dots, dirt specks, and the dirt specks move. And so these are things that we can treat. We'll talk a little bit about that, but other things we want to do is we want to work on preventing them. And one of the best ways we can prevent this is by keeping wild birds out of our coop or away from our birds. I have never run into a case of northern fowl mites where I couldn't trace it back to either starlings, house sparrows, or some other wild bird is nesting or getting into the area, and that's what's spreading those parasites. For scaly leg mites, there are some ways we can do it. You know, coat the legs with oil and then cover them up with a petroleum jelly product to smother the mites. This is kind of something I've done a few times. I actually like adding sulfur powder to that, to the oil, because that sulfur powder has tiny little edges and they're sharp and they're pokey. And by adding those together, you can actually rupture the exoskeleton of the parasite and actually help quickly eliminate the problem. Now, the second suggestion on here, I've never done this one. This comes from Dr. Dare out of Connecticut. He was spent a lot of years working with small flocks, and he recommended dipping the legs in gasoline for about 45 seconds, then air dry and add AD ointment. On the second day, just apply the AD ointment. Then on the third day, you do a second gasoline dip and then keep it applied with AD ointment until the scales are normal. So that's another way to do it. I've never tried that method, but I trust Dr. Dare. He was a great guy. I've always wondered about dipping chicken legs in there into gasoline, but it's not something I've ever done. But again, basically what you want to do is find a way to put a product on there that can smother those mites and kill them that way. Let's see, where'd I go? Scaly leg keeps jumping on me. There are also some products that will help control external parasites, for example, insecticides. Sevin is one that we often see, Prometheans, spinosad. There's a lot of different products out there that are available, but you want to make sure that you read the instructions. You know, in the past, I know Sevin dust was approved for using on chickens. I know the Prometheans are. But again, read the instructions, make sure they're approved, and then use them appropriately on the birds. One of the best ways to prevent any kind of parasite is diatomaceous earth or sulfur powder in their dust bath. So make them a dust bath. If you have a coop where you keep them locked up, you can get a tire, you can put some dirt in there, some sand, and some light stuff, and they'll start dust bathing in it. Once you get them dust bathing there, you can add this diatomaceous or sulfur powder or the Sevin dust or whatever it is you want to use. And by having a little bit of it there, they're going to continually dust bathe in it, and that can help prevent the birds from getting the mites in the first place. But it will also, if they do have mites, it can also help get them controlled. For mites such as the northern fowl mite, one of the most biggest ways you can take care of those is you can dust the bird with sulfur powder. You can dust them with diatomaceous earth, or you can dust them with a chemical product such as Sevin or Promethean, which is approved for that. What we are seeing though is a lot of those mites are resistant to insecticides, so prevention is really the best thing you can do in that situation. Another interesting thing we run into a lot with small flocks are crop issues. When I put that out there, you know, crop problems, everybody's like, oh, crops, as in corn. But no, we're talking about the crop of the chicken. As you know, the chicken's digestive tract, we go from the mouth, we go down the throat, we go to the crop. The crop then is a holding place before it goes to proventriculus and then into the gizzard and on down the track. One of the things we run into with small flocks is they're running around outside. So they encounter a lot of different things that most of our chickens in commercial industry don't. So we see more crop problems in small flocks than we do in the commercial industry. We look for crop problems. In my opinion, the very best time to look is the first thing in the morning. Go out there before they get off the roost, and you can grab them then easily, and you can check them. A normal crop is going to be empty, and it's going to be hard to find because the bird is just waking up. It hasn't eaten all night. However, if your bird has a lot of content when the birds wake up, you can see, okay, that's not right. That crop content should have gone down overnight. So why is that there? And then we can look for problems into it. Another thing, if it's during the day, you can feel the crop. It's going to feel large, but the content will move around under your finger. It's very pliable, and you can move it. It'll wiggle. However, if you have a problem, it's going to feel hard, kind of like a ball. And it'll also, if you smell their breath, it's going to smell bad. Another thing you'll notice is sometimes they'll be hot. With another type like a pendulous crop, it'll actually be filled with liquid and squishy, and I'll show you some pictures of that in a second. But one of the first things we run into is an impacted crop. And when you look at an impacted crop, what you're going to find is you pick that bird up. It's hard to tell in these pictures, but you look at those two birds side by side. The one has it, the other doesn't. The lighter colored, and you look, you can see that crop is much larger. And if you were to feel it, it feels like a golf ball. But what this is that an impacted crop is when you get material in there, the feed with some other stuff, and especially things that are hard to digest, like grass, which is one of the reasons we see this more in birds that are running in tall grass. They'll eat this long grass, but they can't actually digest grass, so then it gets built up in their crop, and it can impact. Then the other can stop the flow of the content out of the crop and cause problems. Other things that can cause problems are string or pieces of tire or anything like that. Just so that's one of the reasons we want to keep things clean around our birds. Plastic is another problem. If they're eating up plastic, it can cause some issues. Again, it's the most easily seen in the morning when the birds wake up. You grab them, you can see that the crop is still full. Ways that you can work with this, there's not a lot you can do, but what we can do in mild cases is you can treat it by massaging the crop gently and rubbing it, kind of like you would a small piece of bread, knead it around, move it around a little bit, try and break it up. Give the bird a lot of water. You don't want to have them eating more, but you want to give them water to drink during this time. Let's see. Severe cases will need a veterinarian. If you've got a lot of string or something down that it's undigestible, you may have to actually go to a veterinarian and have them and surgically remove it. But there's really not a lot you can do. Another one that goes along with that, if you get a lot of impacted crops and the bird keeps getting it, sometimes that can lead to other things like a pendulous crop, which is where the crop actually hangs down. It's pendulous like it says. If you read here, it says the crop is enlarged and distended. It hangs down like a pendulum. It cannot properly empty. And because it cannot properly empty, this can lead to problems like sour crop, which is where you actually have a yeast infection inside that crop. And it will stink. You can smell that one. There really is no treatment because the muscles and the ligaments have been damaged. They've been stretched. They're not going to be able to be put back into the way they were. However, if you look at the picture on the bottom there, you see the top one, you can see the pendulous crop. But you look at the bottom, they have what they call a crop bra. And I've never used one of these, to be honest with you. If I've had pendulous crops, we've just culled them from the herd. The flock. Why'd I say herd? But a crop bra can actually pull that crop up and help it so that it'll stay empty and let the feed move on through. However, if you do use this, it needs to be worn continuously by the bird, because if you let that crop back down, it's going to get that content. It's going to start going sour again on you, and you'll end up back with a sour crop. This can also be caused, and I've seen this, the only place I've really seen this in industry is when we work with breeders, because sometimes they don't get as much as they eat, and so when they do this food, they'll eat as fast as they can, and if they eat and binge eat, you can see a pendulous crop develop in those type of situations. So by us having feed constantly available to your birds is one way that helps prevent this problem from materializing. A sour crop is a yeast infection of the crop. It is often a result of a pendulous crop or an impacted crop. So that's why we want to look at those first two to prevent this third one. What you need to do is empty the crop and treat it for a fungal infection. For example, you can use Epsom salts, 1 teaspoon a cup of water to flush out the bird, and you use copper sulfate, 1/2 teaspoon of copper sulfate to a gallon of drinking water. And by doing this, you're trying to kill that yeast infections in there. But the way you want to get around emptying the crop, and I actually practiced this, my daughter was grossed out, she took the pictures. But here's what you want to do. Basically, you want to give the bird a lot of water, and then you want to massage the crop, and then put your finger between the beaks, open it up, stick your finger in there like it's trying to bite you, and then tip the bird upside down with its head down. And once you start seeing liquid come out, count to 3, then pull it back up, because you don't want the bird to aspirate. You want to make sure that you're doing this in a way that you're going to prevent aspiration. By doing this, you're able to get a lot of that content out. You can get some of that sour out. You can get some of the things out of there that are causing the issue. But again, continue to treat with the medicated water till you make sure everything is cleared up. Other issues that we see in flocks, particularly in layers, is sometimes we'll have what we call a prolapsed oviduct. or what basically people just call it a prolapse or a blowout. A lot of people, you can't really distinguish between some of the different types of prolapses, cloacal, cloaps, oviductal blowout. But anyway, when we look at these things, oftentimes they're caused when the hen goes to lay the egg. If she has a very large egg and it goes through, if you watch the egg get laid, part of the oviduct actually folds outward through the cloaca as the egg's laid, then retracts quickly in. If you have a very, very large egg, what can happen is it can be delayed coming back in, or it can get stuck out. More often, though, you're going to see that if this happens, other chickens are going to see that and start pecking at it, and they peck at it and pull at it, and they can actually pull more of the cloaca out. And the oviduct can be pulled out at this time as well. So what we want to do is we want to make sure, one of the first things to do is to make sure that where your nests are is dark. Because if they're brightly lit, we see a lot more of this problem, because the other chickens are going to see that red as it comes out, they're going to be pecking. Versus if they're not aware of it, because of the darkness, they're not going to be pecking as much. Other things that can lead to this are obesity. So this is another reason to keep our birds in good shape. We don't want them too fat, because we see a lot of reproductive problems in birds that are obese. And we want to keep other big chickens. Yeah, cannibalism, chickens pecking, said that. As prolapses occur, usually they reoccur. It's suggested that hens that suffer from them are cold. We don't want to keep this trait in our flock. We want to stop it right then and there. If the hen is a favorite pet, the prolapse is not severe, then there are some things you can do. For example, separate the hen from the rest of the flock, gently clean, and then push the tissue back inside the hen. If the tissue is injured, you're going to have probably more issues going forward, but you're going to treat with an antibiotic after you get it cleaned. Keep an eye on the hen to make sure it doesn't happen again, and fix possible causes such as obesity, and make sure your nests are in a dim area and feed a proper diet. So those are some of the things you can do if it's a pet, but typically we recommend not keeping them in the flock any longer because of the genetics that are involved there. If you have a hen that looks like this, we've gone too far. That's part of the digestive system hanging out there. Most important thing you do with a bird like that situation is going to be to euthanize it, because there's not a lot you can do. Most prolapses are of the oviduct, but sometimes severe ones can be the intestines. Again, like I said, nothing you can do. Can be caused by trying to lay an egg that's too hard, large, obesity, laying eggs at a young age, or other hens are pecking. Again, these are some of the reasons. Look at how you can adjust your flock in order to prevent them from happening. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is one of the favorite ones on Facebook a few years back, and that's an egg-bound chicken. I think everything on Facebook for a while was an egg-bound. In my life, I've seen this extremely rarely. I think it's often diagnosed because people will get a chicken that dies and they'll open up and say, see, had an egg and it's egg-bound. That's not always the case. They were laying eggs as their life went on. It could have been a heart attack. Who knows? But basically, egg-bound means that an egg is stuck in the oviduct of the hen. Again, this is a rare event and should be treated as an emergency. I think it's often overreported and often associated with overweight hens. Again, we're seeing that keeping our hens in a good productive weight range is going to be better for them as far as health. Birds will appear weak, lose interest in food and water. They may show lameness in one or both legs. The vent will be swollen. They can also walk like a penguin. Seen that a few times. But again, there's really, if that is the situation, what you're going to want to do is gently palpate the abdomen, sorry about that, to feel for the egg. But you want to be careful not to break the egg, because if you break the egg, what can happen is those sharp pieces can then cause damage to the oviduct. You also need to get that egg out. It can lead to infection if you don't. So to help the hen assist in passing the eggs, you want to apply lubricant. You can use some any kind of lubricant you can. You can use mineral oil, you can use KY jelly. There's a lot of different things you can use to apply around the area. Some success I've read, I've never tried this, I'm going to be honest. Some success is giving the hen a warm bath, which tends to relax the muscles and allow the egg to pass. I've heard people say, oh, the bath has to be a warm Epsom salt bath. I've heard a lot of different things. I don't I don't know about that one. I'm just going to be honest on that one. I've not done that one. If the eggs does not, still won't pass, then you're going to need the help of a veterinarian because they're going to have to find a way to get that egg out, either surgically or carefully break the egg and then get the pieces and everything out so that there's no infection that follows. One of the biggest things I've seen in my career, and this is one that's very serious and often overlooked, and that is heat stress. Heat stroke is caused when hens or birds overheat. It's more of a problem in the meat birds than is the layers. And what happens is the temperature get high, birds start to pant. Panting takes energy. Energy creates heat, and you can get into a cycle that makes things worse, and it can spiral upwards in temperature. And this can really be a problem if you have high humidity. So if you have a hot, humid day and your birds do not have shade, you have a problem. So one of the most important things we can do is provide access to shade and plenty of water. Another thing is if there's a hot day and it's humid and there's no wind, take a fan out there and blow a fan on them. They'll appreciate it. They'll get in that fan. That fan will blow on them and help them, like us. That moving air over us will help chill those birds back down. We want to get cool water out there. Don't let their water sit in the sunshine so the only water they have to drink is hot. Put it in a shade, make sure that it's cool and fresh. This allows them to drink more, and that water being cooler will help them to recover a little bit. If a birds are suffering from heat stroke, try to cool them. Again, those fans are one of the best tools that we have out there. Put them in the shade, a cool place. Use a fan. Place bottles of water with them or frozen water. I've seen success using frozen water, especially if you have frozen water by a fan. You get the air moving over the bottle that's cool air, and you can help cool your birds down pretty quickly that way. But again, one of the most important things we need to avoid is that our housing needs to be tall. If your housing is low, I say the roof where your chickens are at is down only a couple feet off the ground, it's going to trap that heat. So we encourage people, if you're doing hoop houses or anything else, have hoop houses or your regular chicken house, have it high enough that birds can stay away from that heat, that heat goes up high enough to get away, and then have a way for that heat to then dissipate out of the house. Because what will happen if it's down low, the birds are going to go to the shady spot thinking that's the cool spot, then they'll pile on each other and you'll end up with a lot of dead birds. So again, be very careful with heat stress during the summer, provide lots of shade. I mentioned this earlier, shock is often a problem for birds that survive a predator attack. Again, give them lots of tender loving care and good food and keep them stress free for a few days. Foot pad dermatitis or bumblefoot is another thing that we see quite often. It is usually, well, basically it's an inflammation of the cutaneous tissue that can affect the superficial to deep layers of the skin. So again, it can come in several different layers. This is a really bad one. On this hen here, you can see how swollen up it is. You can see how deep that's going in. You can treat this with antibiotics, but the most important thing you can do is prevent. And even if you treat this, if you don't take care of what is causing it, you're going to come right back to the same problem. Here's a picture of a broiler. You can see there's some foot pad dermatitis, not near as bad, but you do see it. Again, what leads to foot pad dermatitis? And that's going to be wet litter. The area the birds are hanging out in, whether it's inside their chicken coop or out in their run, they're not getting away from the water. And by having that constantly in the water, it softens that tissue. But also, where it's wet and you have manure, that leads to ammonia. That ammonia can be caustic and can cause burns on the skin, which helps lead to more infections from it. Wet conditions are often a problem. That hen I showed you in the last picture, that farmer, he went back through, his run was always underwater and he put a lot of sand in. He backfilled with sand to where that area is now higher than the rest, so it drains first, so those chickens now have a much drier area, and that has helped him take care of the problem. You can also, well, not you can, but you should also provide a roost. Birds like to roost up high, and if they have a place up on a roost, they're going to be up off that wet area. So being off the wet area is going to help reduce that problem right there. You can do several different types. The one on the right shows layer hen types. They're flying up higher. Now, broilers, meat birds, they don't want to get up off the ground, but you can make these little ramps. As you see on the left, this is actually commercial. The commercial industry uses these quite often to help them as well. But these are actually work very well with broilers if you're doing a broiler project at your house, or young chicks that are learning, very young before they're able to fly up onto the higher roost. They'll love these things. They play on them and it keeps them off the wet floor, and it helps to reduce that foot pad dermatitis. So what you want to do to treat it, you want to soak the foot in warm water with Epsom salts, clean the area with soap and warm water. Because remember, whenever we want to disinfect something, we have to clean it first. So we want to clean and then disinfect with alcohol. If the skin is open, drain the pus or the abscess. You're going to might have to massage a little bit to get everything out. If there's no break in the skin to allow drainage or access, use a sterile scalpel or a sharp edge to make one, because we got to get that pus out of there in order to help it heal. Flush the abscess with peroxide, and then we want to pack the cavity with antibiotic ointment and wrap the foot to keep it clean. But again, you can't then just put it right back out there in the environment that caused it. We have to fix the environment that caused it in order to fix the situation. You're going to have to repeat this daily until the foot heals. Cannibalism can often be another problem. Birds will pick at sores or cuts on other birds, and this can become aggressive. This can happen with new birds are introduced. For example, if you're trying to merge two flocks and the pecking order has changed. So we have to figure everything out. The chickens, they take time. So one thing we tell people to do is to introduce new birds slowly, or really change things up. Maybe move some of the top, what do you want to call them? The top hens out, the roosters out, or change the roosters. Make a big change all at once so the newbies aren't the only ones that are in a different situation. Excessive aggression by roosters can sometimes cause problems from hens that can lead to cannibalism. But we don't want to overlook aggression by hens. Interestingly enough, we've done some research in my past where we look at aggression in roosters and hens, and we found that hens suffer more aggression from hens than they do from roosters. So look for who's causing the problem. And then what you can do, if there's blunt their beaks. Take those nail trimmers and trim them so that their beaks aren't as sharp, and that will help to prevent some of the injuries. If we look at this picture here, this is not cannibalism. This is a mating problem. So when the males mount the hens, they're going to ruffle those feathers on the back. You can see the feathers are bare. And if you look right at the base of the head, by the comb there, underneath the comb, you can see there's a bare spot there because the rooster's going to grab there and he's going to climb on the hen. And we call it treading when he's on there. And as he moves around, he can cut that hen up. This hen has just lost feathers, but you'll sometimes see hens that have big gaping wounds because those nails on those birds, those roosters can dig in and can cause a lot of damage. You will need to treat those if they happen. And one of the things you can do, again, clean, disinfect the wound, but you can also put on what we call a breeding saddle. And this is a picture of a breeding saddle. As you see here, this is a store-bought one. My wife actually made a bunch for my son last year. So what they are is just a sewed on, you strap them over the wings. They've got a way to hold on, and then they put it on the back. So now when the rooster treads on there, he's not actually going to scratch up the hen. It protects her, and it also allows those wounds underneath to heal, and it prevents the other birds from pecking at them. So they can't even see those wounds are there. It's going to help them to stay safe. Again, here's a couple places you can buy them, but hey, if you're handy with a sewing machine, you can actually make them quite simply. Lastly, I want to show this slide here, which it's a backyard block help for Maryland residents. Basically what you should do, and it goes through the different things. Do I need to call the diagnostic lab, the veterinarian, the University of Maryland Extension? It shows you what all of them what all of them will do. For example, while you wait to try and figure out what's going on, enhance your biosecurity. We're telling everybody at this time of year to keep your biosecurity tight. We don't want to see any more avian influenza than we've already seen. And that means to isolate our birds, keep them separate from other birds. When you go to the feed store, you figure you've been around other people with birds. When you go home, don't wear those shoes out to where your birds are at. Change your shoes, wash your hands, prevent that spread of disease from the store to your birds. And again, if you have sick birds, keep them warm and healthy. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we will take some questions if you have any at this time.